A mother tongue language is fundamental to a people's cultural heritage, either for an individual or a community. As a part of language, we have names. That is, we give names to our children, things around us, places, plants and animals. For many indigenous peoples, names of such things are known orally, and in traditional cultures, these are passed down from one generation to the next. However, because many names were not recorded in writing, some names have gone extinct, or their meaning has been forgotten. South Africa's official language policy requires that where words, for example names and technical words, are missing in any of the indigenous languages, such words need to be derived that are appropriate to that language. However, a large backlog exists in the development of African language terminologies, as the process entails extensive fieldwork, is costly, and therefore seldom undertaken. Concerns about the urgent need for indigenous African bird names were first expressed in 1939 by Dr. Austin Roberts, who stated his concerns that bird names were being lost and were not being recorded. The authors of the Zulu English Dictionary, Dirk and Vilagazi, had 69 Zulu bird names that could not be linked to a known species. An entry might simply be a small bird. However, recently published bird books, such as Hockey's et al.'s Roberts 7 Handbook and Chittenden et al.'s Roberts Field Guide, in both these books all indigenous bird names have been excluded. It is not surprising that a serious lack of ornithological resources in African mother tongue languages exists. Aviatourism and birding became elitist, and a possible future consequence is that forthcoming books on our birds may not have the indigenous names, therefore perpetuating these concerns. Professor Gordon MacLean described the problem when compiling the 1985 edition of Roberts' Birds as follows. Bird names in the African language present far more problems than the European-derived languages. Many of them are generic, others regionally limited in their application. One name may be applied to two or more different birds. Some well-known birds may have more than one name in a single language. Most birds have no African name at all. The naming of birds in Zulu in the past has been incomplete, inaccurate, and inconsistent, according to Koopman et al. In view of this, the Zulu Bird Name Project was undertaken in 2013 to 2019. It began with a literary review by Adrian Koopman, where all previously published Zulu bird names were listed, starting from the 1899 book by the Woodward brothers. A team comprising of the 3 authors and 18 qualified bird guides participated. The role of the authors was to ensure linguistic and ornithological rigor. Workshops were rigorous, research-based, linguistic, participatory and consultative processes, with Zulu-speaking bird experts drawn from all quarters of KwaZulu-Natal who had a combined knowledge of both the Zulu language and the avifauna of the area. We followed a linguistic process of confirmation, in other words, an historical bird name still in use, extension, usually applied to a cluster of birds that had a generic name, for example, Idada for the ducks, and each species had to get a name. Oral, in other words, some birds were only known by the guides and not recorded in any way. And it left us with a few names that had to be created, and we certainly avoided transliteration. In other words, the common moorhen did not become E. moorheni. It was given the name Ukuku Yamanzi. This is the core team with the authors, and the top Zulu bird guides that participated and contributed significantly to these publications. The results: 2 books were published, the first being Amagama, Ezinyoni, Zulu Names of Birds, by the KwaZulu-Natal University Press in 2020, gives the standardized Zulu name for each species, explains the underlying meaning and how the names came into being. All earlier names for these birds, even if no longer in current use, have been recorded. Thus, the book is also an historical repository, having a total of 671 names for the 550 KwaZulu-Natal bird species. The second book, The Birds of KwaZulu-Natal and Their Zulu Names, 2020, published by the John Fulker Bird Book Fund, part of the Roberts series, is a photographically illustrated field guide with the standard Zulu, English and scientific names for each species, together with distribution maps and text explaining the meaning of the names where known. As such, it is groundbreaking, being the first of its kind in Africa. The book also includes a section on the birds of conservation concern and highlights the BirdLife South Africa designated important bird areas. This slide shows a 2-page spread from the book with the maps, the texts on the left, and the illustration of the birds. It is a contribution to South Africa's official language policy by providing and confirming the Zulu bird names for 550 species. We now have names for 3 of the 11 official languages, that is, Afrikaans, English, and Zulu. The method used is recommended as the most applicable for use by others to derive and list the names of plants and animals in all the other official languages. These common names must be incorporated into published species field guides, brochures, and publicity material produced by nature conservation authorities. In addition, species checklists in management plans must incorporate these names so that they are on hand and can be used by managers. This slide gives an analysis of the 671 bird names for the 550 species. 152 names were confirmed from that the historical names were still in use. 210 names were qualified. As an example was the ducks. Some names were adapted. That was 142 names. There were oral names, dictionary names, and new names, and they comprise only 15.8% of all the names. Avian nomenclature in South African Bantu language has been neglected. The Zulu Bird Names Project addressed this matter comprehensively, with rigour and authoritatively. Attention to bird names in all other indigenous languages is required as soon as possible before this traditional knowledge is lost. Bird field guide books in the other African languages need to be compiled and published because names of animals and plant species are fundamental to biodiversity conservation. If one cannot communicate by means of a unique individual species name that is known and understood by people, then one cannot direct conservation efforts, record vital information about the species, or involve local communities in conservation initiatives. This becomes all the more important in our conservation efforts, given that there is such a wide diversity of languages, cultural groups, terrestrial and marine biodiversity. With this list of Zulu bird names, bird guides can now use these names in their mother tongue language to create awareness, appreciation, and to inculcate an interest in birds amongst children, their teachers, and adults of the birds of KwaZulu-Natal. Indigenous bird names and association bird law is a cultural heritage that needs to be researched and continually fostered in schools and universities and amongst the general South African public. The two books are a resource that can be used by learners, academics, birders, and nature conservation personnel working in KwaZulu-Natal. Hopefully, in this way, more and more people will do whatever they can to conserve and protect the environment, its plants and animals.